welcome to the Spawdcast. My name's Carrie Hyde, and I am your host and your pet's life coach. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that can be really hard at times and almost inevitable that we will end up in this point with our pets. So we're going to be talking about hospice and our senior pets and what happens with the life that they go through, and when we get them to the end of their life, what we can do to help them, how we raise them. And so I brought on somebody who has dedicated her life. I'm about to tear up a little bit because I have a very strong spot for elderly dogs, senior dogs, and most of us who have had pets have had to inevitably put our pets down and to watch them age very rapidly. And so I brought on somebody that I couldn't think of anybody else that could touch to reach us in this way, and in a very compassionate way, but also in a very respectful way, and knowing what to do. So I'd like to introduce you to Michele Allen. Michele, hi. How are you?
I'm good, Carrie. Thank you for such a lovely introduction.
It's a tough subject, and it's anyone who's ever had a bond with an animal knows that when you have to make that decision, or in some cases the decision is made for you, no matter whether it's quick, no matter whether it's long, no matter what happens, it's difficult. And I think maybe you would agree with this, but I think sometimes what makes it even more difficult when it's an animal is not everybody understands, right?
Yes, it's very hard to know what circles are okay to reach out to for support.
Right.
And the other thing is it doesn't matter if they're young, if it was sudden, if they were old, and it's a blessing if you saw it coming. There's something called the burden of grief, and that's just what it is. It is how heavy your heart is going to be until it's not anymore. And so people will say, well, thank goodness they went fast, or, well, they were 15. It doesn't matter. So trying to find comfort in those words doesn't help. Just know that your friends are trying to be your friends. Yeah. But that's not going to help.
Right. So Michele has a place called Monkey's House. And Michele, tell us, first off, I love the name. I love the name. I can't wait to hear about it, but sometimes I call dogs little monkeys. So it's just such a lovely name, and it has such a good, but tell us a little bit about how you got started.
I got started the way most life-changing events happen. It was by accident. I was fostering for a local shelter, and actually ended up with a dog that had a brain tumor, and no one knew it, and I could see something was wrong. And her name was Goldie. She was a beautiful golden retriever. She was emaciated, but she was everything that's amazing about that breed. Loving, sweet, had an athletic stride. I couldn't get her to eat. I couldn't get her to stop staring at a corner. And I ended up sneaking her off to my vet and paying the bill. And then the shelter really wasn't set up for foster homes. It bucked the system. They wanted to do a surgery on her. And I kept saying, this is the wrong move for this dog. And I found out who the surgeon was going to be, and I made an appointment in their office like I was a regular patient, and sat there all calm and cool until the vet came in. And then I burst into tears, and I said, this isn't my dog. I'm responsible for this bill, but things are wrong with her that I can't seem to communicate, and I just feel like surgery is the wrong move for this dog. And I can't tell you, it was like a Tuesday night. It was the last appointment. This vet could have been tired. She was amazing, and she told me my foster dog was dying, and she left. I felt empowered, devastated, but empowered by her words, her kindness, her empathy. So we adopted Goldie. We put her to sleep very shortly thereafter, and I promised to love her forever. But my frustration, my journey with her, my taking her to the vet, using my birthday money to pay for her appointments, that led me to the realization that there was zero resources for dogs with terminal diagnoses in the shelter system. This was before GoFundMe's, and there's nothing. And if very often it's just being an astute observer that helps you understand that something more is going on. And there's nothing for these dogs. So after Goldie, we got asked frequently to take sick dogs, and we couldn't keep up the pace. And I kept trying to think of a way to do this. Who wants to write bylaws? Who wants to think about this kind of thing? So we had a little guy named Monkey who really fit the model. He was brought to the shelter. He was a Heinz 57, tiny little thing with teeth everywhere, in congestive heart failure. They asked if I would take him. I said, sure. I didn't feel drawn to him. I just felt like I was doing the right thing. And he rocked our world. He changed our lives. The vet, the same thing. I went being a retired registered nurse, and having had other dogs with congestive heart failure, I went to the shelter vet and I asked for some scripts for some meds that I needed a vet for. And I said, I'll pay for them. And he said, no, he's a little shelter dog. You'll have him for a week, maybe 3 weeks, just enjoy him. And that triggers me. They're not a little shelter dog. They're a being, they're a life, they're worth everything. They're worth fighting for. So like I always did, we adopted him, got him all the specialists that he needed, and he was with us for 17 vibrant months and inspired us. The grief for him was so bad. It was so bad that started me. I started a Facebook page for my husband, and I put it privately, and I just said Monkey's House. And that pushing through that grief, it gave us a way to honor him and a way to really get things moving. So he was a really cute little guy. We loved him to bits, and he rocked our world. And wow. We are forever changed in every way that you could imagine.
So going back to, the Golden Retriever, that was their only solution, just to do this surgery and then and nothing else. That's it. They would just. Why do you think that was the choice they were making?
She didn't look sick. She looked very thin, but her coat wasn't matted. She had a lump on her side. And so they were concerned that they were concerned what the lump was.
Right.
They weren't the ones seeing her stuck in the corners. They sent her into foster because she wouldn't eat and she wouldn't lay down. And at that point, my knowledge was, I'm Italian, I can get anything to eat. And I couldn't get her to eat anything. I couldn't. And when I took her to my vet, I came home with sub-Q fluids, with appetite stimulants, but my vet agreed that my observations were very pertinent. Yes, yeah. She was beautiful. Yes, she looked like everyone else's dog. Yes, something was really, really wrong.
Yeah. And
so I think like I said, the shelter didn't have a very big foster system at the time. Mm-hmm. They weren't used to people bucking the system, and very often people just need a little encouragement. When your foster dog has pooped for the 6th time on your beige rug and you don't feel like you're making progress, right. You just need someone to say you're doing okay. And yeah. I think they thought that I just needed encouragement when I was onto a very real problem for this dog.
So what Monkey's House does is you go into the shelters and take out. Are they all seniors, or are they just terminally ill?
We just recently lost a 3-year-old beautiful Labrador Retriever. We just got to him too late. He came to us through another rescue, but the dogs that we have come through shelters, and they're time stamped, meaning they're going to be killed because they have concerning health issues. And that's common practice in many shelters, where they'll if dogs have behavioral issues, they'll want them to go to a rescue, and they'll give them a certain amount of time to get rescued before they'll kill them. Same thing with health issues. So we don't adopt out. We're looking for the sickest. With me being a retired nurse, we work very close with our veterinarian, but we do so much here. The first thing they do is go to the vet, and they get blood work and x-rays, they see specialists and cardiologists, whatever we need to do to be responsible. But here at home, I can give sub-Q fluids, take blood sugars, do insulin, oxygen, continuous IV therapy. I think I sent you a picture of the Labrador Retriever. So by day, he had just a little Heplock IV in his arm.
Yeah.
At night, he slept in our king-size bed, on continuous IV fluids with me on a leash tied to him. So if he moved, I woke up right away.
Right.
But that's how you get to still live.
Yeah.
While you're dying. We made the most of that time, not treating him like he was sick, but supporting him and being as well as he could be.
In an environment that is, some of these dogs have been great, all dogs. I mean, but it's so sad to me that they end up in these places and then they just wait to die and nobody adopts them. And that's really what Monkey's House does, is provide. It's not about you getting dogs and healing them and finding homes for them. I want that to be very clear, because not that there's not a place for that, there is, but Monkey's House takes the terminally ill and provides them a loving place. How many dogs can you take?
It depends on the population. So we're free range, which means if you were to come over right now, you would have to sit on the floor because the dogs have the sofas and the chairs and the bed.
And I would be in heaven.
That's kind of our goal. No room for people.
Yeah.
But they are crated for meals for safety purposes.
Sure.
But the rest of the time they're free range. So there's a delicate balance of, dogs that are blind have to kind of feel their way around. Dogs that are arthritic don't want to be bumped into. So there's a delicate balance of what's going on. I would say I can be very busy with 15 dogs, and I can be, depending on their needs, and I can be doing just fine with 30 dogs.
Right.
It depends on the population and what's going wrong.
Sure. Yeah, because different kinds of treatments, right? If you have a diabetic dog, you're going to be giving insulin. And yeah, I could see, that's just for me. People ask me in my boarding facility, how many dogs? And we only board 15 dogs a night, but we will take 20, but our last 5 have to be very low key kind of dogs, because anything, if I took 16 and the 16th one created the whole energy problem. And we talked before off camera about energy and the differences in who you take. And we had also talked about sometimes people will call you and want you to take their senior or sick dogs and have them live their life out there. And that is not what you do, right? Right.
That's not what I do. I'm very happy to help people who call me who have questions, who want to know if blood work is necessary before a dental, or why a cardiologist costs so much money to do an echocardiogram. I'm very happy to explain all of that. And I really encourage people to have a good relationship with their vet. This is not a paid position. I've given up everything because I hate from my core that these dogs are dying so betrayed. Many of the dogs, you can tell they were loved. We had one named Fifi that she would just hug. And her owner, I think, had been sick for a while. And when people are sick, the families are doing what they can, scrambling to care for the person, and the dog gets neglected. But then the dog is grieving too. And to end up in a shelter where it doesn't matter how wonderful the volunteers are. It doesn't matter if it's a new shelter or an old shelter. The dogs in shelters are stressed, and so the calmest of dogs are stressed. And if you think of you have a boarding business. But when I think of the list I used to give my house sitter of what, it was not 1 cup of food and please fill up the water. It was, if they looked at you like this, they did something special and need a treat. If they wake up like this, and there's a million things for just a few dogs. And if you can imagine having no one to say, what their trick is, to say that they have to go potty or that their stomach gets upset if they eat a certain food. And these dogs are sick. Very often the shelter will timestamp them or put them on the list to be killed. Let's say what it is. They're on the list to be killed because they can't walk. And they can't walk because they're so matted. And I work with another rescue, and Tiny Paws, and I'm very good friends with the founder, and she used to be a hairdresser, which means she is very brave with the clippers, and she just shaves them down, and all of a sudden they can walk, and it's a cure. And
they feel better.
Yep.
They feel better. I've had, it's the hardest ones for me to do, but at my business we do grooming, and I have over the years had people call me and say, they think it's time, but for some reason, every time the dog gets groomed, it sparks a little more life in them. And so I've had people bring their dogs to me and say they think this is going to be their last visit. And then we groom them, and then I'll get a call the next day, and they're like, oh no, she's running around the house. So I don't know, I mean, I feel good when I get my hair done. It's weird to think that a dog could feel that from just having their hair cut. And these aren't matted dogs. These aren't, I understand when a dog can't walk because believe me, I've seen that, where the mats are so bad they can't, it's got in their toes and stuff like that. But I think just having someone care for them and spend that kind of attention with them can bring a dog out of depression. And it breaks my heart when I hear people say that animals don't feel or have depression. But have you seen that, like a dog, what feels like came out of depression when he's made it to Monkey's house?
Yes. Well, actually, when you're saying when they come for grooming, so whenever I groom a dog, my groomer has asked our volunteers to take my clipper blades away. But if our dogs are punky and we can't quite figure out what's going on with them, one of the things we very often do is give them a bath. And it's not a bath where they need to be clean, where something has to be symmetrical, or anything. It's just really pretty smelling shampoo, the massage, the warm water, the toweling, the holding, the blow drying, the attention. And I think that perks all of us up to have someone acknowledge that you're in a punk and make a tiny, tiny fuss over you. It's an amazing thing what it can do. Yeah. But yes, we see big transformations with dogs when they get here, very often just by changing their diet. Yeah. And then from there, pretty much we can give them a decent quality for at least a short amount of time. Right.
And that's, you touched on diet, which is another just absolutely amazing thing about you, is so many rescues, for lack of just better resources and ability to do it, will feed foods that are very, very poor quality just because it's all that they can afford or is available. But your dogs, tell us what it's like to feed your dogs.
So we feed raw or home cooked, and Dr. Judy Morgan helped me get started in all this, and my dogs were her patients for a while, and seeing the changes, seeing the impact that traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, the food therapy component, seeing the differences that could do for our dogs. It could dial down arthritis. It could dial down congestive heart failure. It could nothing is cured. I want to say nothing is cured. Everything is dialed down. Right. And it has taught me to really look at acute situations, which let's say your dog, his tongue is blue and his respirations are 80 and your vet wants to put him on oxygen and is saying this may be it. You have to say, this is an acute situation. Is this something we can dial down to a chronic situation? And that's kind of our key to success in a way, is that we have with food therapy, with feeding, everyone is on a balanced home cooked diet until we get their labs back. I don't want to stress any organs out, asking them to digest anything fancy. But really the magic begins when we can move them to raw, if we can. Yeah. Some of them are really old, their pancreas is really tired, and they just do better uncooked. Yeah. But it makes a big difference. It does. So breakfast and dinner, the meals take about 2 hours each, and we consider it the same as a therapy, as a surgery or a rehab or an adventure. It's important. It's an important component of the work that we do here.
is food. And
Yeah.
it's the one component I think is really underestimated as to what we can do and how much life we can give these animals is through food. And what better person to talk to about that than somebody who's taking terminally ill patients and giving them just such a better life. And I mean, just even arthritis. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see pets who have arthritis who are eating kibble-fed dogs, and just a simple diet change instead of so many supplements. So how long have you been running Monkey's House?
We officially opened our doors in 2015, but we've been doing it on our own since 2010.
Okay. And then it's you and your husband, and then I know you have a few volunteers. How many?
We have, at this point, COVID has kind of messed things
Sure.
up quite a bit. So we work out of my house. And so this was a lot of people coming and going from my house. Right now we have just a handful, I would say 5 or 6 volunteers that are helping out with transport, that are helping out with cooking, helping out returning messages. And we've done a few, so enrichment is very big here. And we've done a few field trips where it used to be that everyone would come here and we'd leave from here. We've done it where we've all met now at the beach.
Yeah.
Where we've met, we went to see Santa. It's different, but we're still making it work. So, I'm only asking the people who feel safe. We're all masked, trying to do our best.
Right.
But for the most part, we're scaled down. Still moving forward, still giving good quality care. And I've learned new ways to provide enrichment to keep the dogs mentally entertained. A lot of our dogs are deaf and blind, and they rely on scents and changes
sound.
in environments to keep their brain active. So I've gotten more creative. But
do you have difficulty getting them from the pounds when they end up there? Is it a hard? How do you go about that?
I don't go physically to the shelter anymore. Everybody here has cancer, has immune system problems. They're very, very weak. And it seems that the dogs we pull are the ones that get kennel cough or even worse. We call it the Philly crud, but it's like a super pneumonia. So they go into a quarantine foster for 2 weeks or longer, just to make sure they're not bringing anything here. We don't have any troubles getting them out of the shelter. Very often I have to, it's hard because you have life and death talks with the foster that, over the phone or through Facebook Messenger. But we need to make sure, I don't want them dying in the shelter. And
Right.
if that means they're dying in your arms, we've met our goal. We try not to rush dogs to emergency rooms. I'd rather people be focused on the dog, and we've been pretty blessed. I've had troubles taking dogs to emergency rooms where all they'll say is, "Listen, they're old, they have a lot wrong. Why don't you just put them down?" And that pushes my buttons. And just recently, we underwent one of our dogs here named Tequila. He's a Cocker Spaniel. He's blind. He lost both of his eyes to glaucoma, and he's deaf. He has heart issues. And we did an ultrasound because he was acting really off. And we found a splenic mass. And I'm familiar with hemangiosarcoma and started him on Union Bayal. And things were under control. I was waiting to get an appointment with one of these places to further things along. 2 hospitals said I would have to take him to the emergency room. Now, he was laying on a sofa in the sun with me. And if he was going to die, that's where I wanted him to die. I was not going to put him in a cage. He was dumped by his family once, and it was not going to happen again. But I knew he had the chutzpah to get through the surgery, and my vet said, "Why don't you try one more place?" So I happened to have the office managers' names and stuff, and I sent a picture of him with no eyes, I sent his current lab work. I sent his ultrasound report, and a letter. And she contacted me right away. And within an hour, the surgeon called me, the surgeon of my dreams. He's extremely skilled. And he said, if you could have him here in a couple of hours, our cardiologist happened to be at that hospital that day. He can just fine tune anything that needs to be done. They could give him a blood transfusion or two that night and do surgery first thing in the morning. So I did it. And he flew through everything. He was home a day early. Today we're celebrating, today is week 6 of extra time. Oh. Took him for a walk in the Pine Barrens. He's happy, and he's feeling and acting like he did in July. And when you find out, so he's been with us a little while, and you wonder, what did I miss? But these tumors grow in deep, and there's very often no symptoms until they collapse, until there's an event. But he's feeling fabulous, and we're appreciative for every day that we have with him.
That's amazing. What do you think is, I know we had talked a little bit about the medical side of it. What are some of the biggest challenges? Is it getting veterinary care? Do any of the vets do anything as a charity for you? I mean, it has to be very expensive to get medications and IVs, even if you're doing it yourself. What are some of your big challenges?
So anyone who's thinking about having a hospice, do not do this until you find a vet and say, listen, I want to have a hospice and I need your help. So our vet is extremely generous with her time, with her knowledge, with her creativity. When we go to the office, we receive a discount. But the texts at midnight are free. And she's a traditionally educated veterinarian who's very open to some of my, I can feed, let me try and feed through this. She's open to some of my strangeness, and she's a good egg, and she's very creative. So a lot of people don't have dogs as sick as our dogs are. It's not the norm. Like I said, we have oxygen here. We can sedate them if they're getting into respiratory distress, until we can get a veterinarian out for euthanasia. So a lot of dogs are not as sick as the ones that are here. But our dogs, you couldn't pick out the sick ones. Though you might be, if you meet us at the beach, you might be pulling the wagon with a dog whose head is perked up and he wants to know what's going on, and you might say, what's wrong with him? And I'll just say he's having troubles walking. I won't tell you the whole list of all the things that's wrong.
So are you able to do all of these things, IVs and sedation, because of your nursing degree? Is this something that somebody could do outside of that without having any kind of degrees or background?
It's something that anyone can do if their vet shows them. And that's the key, is having your vet show them. So my learning curve is smaller because I'm familiar with a lot of things. Fifi, the dog that I said was such a good hugger, when she came to me, she was unconscious. She was like flaccid. And I raced her to Dr. Morgan's office, and we did blood work. We got things going, and she called me back a few hours later, and she says, well, she's diabetic. You're going to have to give her insulin. And that was, she's quick and to the point, and there you go. But I just said, are there any specific sites? Like in people, there's different sites where you give insulin. It's important to rotate sites. And she just said anywhere you can grab some tissue is okay. So my learning curve, what high blood sugar looks like, what low blood sugar looks like, when insulin should be increased, when to do a blood sugar, that was all quick and easy, but that's something anyone can learn. Anyone at all can learn. It's a matter of the level of commitment that you want to make to your dog and as they're aging. But Eve is, I think she's coming on 3 years. She's a blind and deaf, crazy Yorkie. And she came here in kidney failure, diabetic, emaciated. and she's kind of a hoot and a half. So they're the quality is just a little bit different. Your routine is a little bit different, but the quality is there. They're still a dog. They still want to be a dog. They still love.
Do you think that that pet parents tend to give up too soon when they're in a vet office and a vet says there's nothing more I can do for you?
I want to say that gently. I want to say
Sure.
yes gently. They're looking to their vet for advice. They're looking for their vet for guidance, and they don't want their best friend to suffer. And doing this, I have what I like for me, a definition of suffering is pain or confusion where no one knows and there's no help coming. That's suffering. If they're short of breath and I'm right there with them and I've got them on oxygen and I'm trying to give them something to slow their breathing down, they're just short of breath and I'm taking action to resolve it. So I think people don't want their animals to suffer. They don't know exactly what that means. It's a very scary word. It can get people who aren't willing to spend money to drop $10,000. And it can get other people to make a decision to euthanize without realizing that there are things that they can still try. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of vets, their basic appointments, it's shots, it's spaying and neutering, it's well visits. It's not the more complicated passing out from pulmonary hypertension, passing epilepsy versus brain tumor. I had a dog that could pass out. He had epilepsy and then later on a brain tumor. He also had sick sinus syndrome or a very slow heart rate, so he'd pass out from that. And he also would pass out from pulmonary hypertension. And from being a nurse, I noticed the wobble and the disorientation faster, and I'm quick to take action and then quick to get on the phone with the cardiologist or wherever they need to be. But I don't want anyone to ever feel guilty that they followed their vet's advice and did what they needed to do to give their dog comfort. But for people that want to say, hell no, or I want a second opinion, as long as they're not in a seizure that they can't break, or they're not in so much pain that they can't control it, or they're not having respiratory problems, fight. If you want to fight, find another vet.
Yeah.
Fight.
I think, we talk about this a lot on this show is sometimes veterinarians say there's nothing else that can be done, but what I think they might really mean is there's nothing else they have in their toolbox that can do it. And I think pet parents a lot of times think that there's some kind of absolute, if you're a veterinarian, then these are the only options, but there's so many more options and so much life you can give a senior dog. And I would say in a lot of cases that are, we just kind of put them down and they may have been able to. Has that been your experience? I think it has.
110%.
Yeah.
110%. Very often, just food, changing their diet, and taking them for walks. And I'm not, we're not marathoners here. Our driveway is 440 feet long. So up and back a couple times a day, it can make a difference in dementia. It can make in heart issues, with hind end strength issues.
Yeah.
Just something that takes a few minutes, a few times a day can change their world tremendously.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that about dementia because I do run a doggy daycare, and what I've seen a lot is people will bring dogs into doggy daycare that have all that high energy when they're puppies. But as soon as they hit 2 years old, they just think that that's it and they don't have to do it. But the seniors can benefit from it, even if they're not running around. And, we live in a city, so there's not a lot of places that people are taking them out for walks and maybe they can't. I don't know everybody's situation, but I've said that a lot. I've seen some really remarkable things happen with seniors when they're just exposed to a little bit more environment and things to do. And And, even if the dog doesn't get up and play with the kid, he's still watching and his brain activity is still working. And I've seen dementia dogs, come in and board for a week, and we see towards the end of the week this little spark, his little butt'll wag, and, it's like, oh, he's starting to come out of what might have been depression, not dementia. So I'm
it's
happy
amazing, even just a snuffle mat. Even something as simple as a snuffle mat or a slow feeder, just to stimulate their brain cells. And if you, I'm kind of, let me tell you, fighting for dogs, I'm fearless. But the Michele Allen that's not fighting for dogs, I'm an introvert. I don't really want to. I like to sit on my sofa and just be in my little spot.
Yeah.
And if you sit down and start talking to me, I'll find out that you're a very nice person and that we have stuff in common and that we can talk. But I wouldn't seek you out, and I don't do that. I'm just kind of quiet. And dogs are the same way. Sometimes you just got to say, hey, this is a ball. If they just want to carry it, just let them carry it. They don't have to play fetch anymore.
Yeah.
But they all need a job.
I know. We talk about that a lot on the show, is giving your dogs. I don't feed my dogs in a bowl anymore at all. They just don't. They hunt in the backyard. I throw stuff. I hide stuff. They're starting to find all my hiding places, though. It's getting a little. I'm like, I need a bigger backyard, because I will hide them. And now I notice when they're ready to go, like I'll go out there and I'll hide. They go straight to the spots. I'm like, dang it, I'm gonna have to start putting these things up in the trees. But I always tell people, feeding dogs for me takes me about 5 to 7 minutes to prepare it, and about 2 hours for them to eat it, because they are spending so much time. And my dogs are just beginning their senior years. I have an 8 and 9-year-old, which you wouldn't even have a clue how old they were if you met them. They're so active. But they're starting those. And so now I find myself really spending a lot more time cognitively making sure that brain activity is working. So
that is awesome.
Yeah, and it's kind of my movement right now is no more bowls. I know in some cases we need to. I'm not suggesting that you can't, but in general speaking, because I can't imagine your situation being able to not do that. But I think in general, if we can make their feeding time be a little bit more activity involved in it. We did an interview with a wolf expert, and we talked about how long it can take them to eat, like the whole process. And I just think about how eating for us, right, is such a social thing. We go to dinner with our friends. It's a social event, and dogs are very social beings, and then we just kind of take them away from it. So we talked a little bit, I know before this, about no-kill and kill shelters. And you said something to me that really made me really think. Do you remember that conversation we had about how you become a no-kill shelter?
Yeah. So a no-kill shelter, it's a movement that started out with the best of intentions, and it sounds good. It sounds
Sure.
great, but there's truly no such thing. And there is to be considered a no-kill shelter, you have to have 90% of your dogs leave alive, either through rescue or through being reclaimed or being adopted out. That's 90%. So if they leave that 10% for a dog that maybe has been in a catastrophic hit by a car accident, and this is something that's quick and merciful, or if their behavior is such that they find that it's dangerous to adopt them out to the public. That's what that leeway is there for. But it's not monitored at all. So there are no-kill shelters that do tremendous work, and do everything they can to keep their statistics up. And then there are other shelters that are very unscrupulous. And they'll say the dog is thin, I think their kidneys are bad, it looks like they have a dry eye, their nails are long, and they need a dental. We need to kill them. And that infuriates me. And with seniors, when you can list things that are wrong, and again, there's no definition of suffering like that.
Right.
they can kill them and maintain a no-kill rate.
Yeah.
Which
and the
makes steam come out.
It's so infuriating because the reason they want to do that, if I understand correctly, is because they're going to get more funding if they're a no-kill shelter. I mean, I'm sure our listeners right now, as you're listening this, would say to yourself, if you were going to donate to a kill shelter or a no-kill shelter, you would want to support that no-kill because you would think this is, so it benefits the shelter to exaggerate health issues in an animal to be able to put him down versus keeping him alive and then having him, right?
Correct. Correct. So the shelter where Goldie came from, the Golden Retriever that I was telling you about, they're a no-kill shelter. And they'll call me on the phone and they'll say, we just got this dog and she has mammary masses and she's got this and she's got that, but she's got a lot of spunk left in her. What diet can we put her on? And I'll tell them, you need to cook this, no carbs. And next thing you know, their volunteers are bringing in the food that the dog needs. And the dog may get a palliative spay surgery through the shelter.
Wow.
And they get adopted out or placed knowing that they have an issue or knowing that they've started something. And that they're amazing people. They're amazing people fighting that fight. But the shelter that we pull from the most will euthanize a dog for an ear infection, and it doesn't count against them.
That's so thankful that there are people like you that are fighting, and I know there's a lot of people doing that, and there's people that want to do that. So I want nothing more than to help Monkey's House, and that's why you're here, and that's why I'm here, and we're going to do what we can. Can you tell me a little bit about you have a book that you wrote, right?
Yes, Where Dogs Go to Live.
Where Dogs Go to Live. So where can we get this book?
You can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Or from any bookstore. If they don't have it in stock, they'll order it in for you.
Okay. And this book is just stories of, I shouldn't say just, but these are stories of dogs that you've taken care of, and do you talk about the care that you give them in there and their medical treatments and stuff?
We cover everything in there. Yeah. And it's so funny. We pull the dogs based on what's wrong with them. But we have a large following on Facebook, and every single one of these dogs, you would think that I spoke to people and had inside word on who is the most special. And it's their personalities come out and come to life when they're here. So, so this book is about 38 characters and their journey here. We do talk about nutrition. We talk about something called sofa medicine, which to me, if it can be done on my sofa, we do it. And I'm an asthmatic. I've had pneumonia a few times. The worst thing I can do is get pneumonia and feel so sick that I have to go to the hospital. I hate the hospital. I want to stay home. I want to be on my sofa. And I feel like that's how the dogs feel too, where everything can be okay. We can get we can get a dog that's short of breath and have them in an oxygen tent. And if it's something that's going on, there's a lot of reasons why they can become short of breath, but if it's something that can be resolved with oxygen, within 15 minutes, they can be on our sofa in an oxygen tent and chewing on a fish stick. And that beats an emergency room any day.
Any day of the week. Do you ever have any animals that are caregiver animals where you see another sick animal? I've seen this in the veterinary hospitals. We had like a cat that was a special cat, and when we had a really sick animal, this cat would always go lay. Do you see that within your community?
We do. We've had some really beautiful moments here. My personal shepherd would lay and would touch dogs that she's a shepherd. She didn't really want to touch anything.
Right.
And she would lay and touch them and nuzzle them. We also had a little Chihuahua that would sit on them. And I swear it was like, this one, come take this one. but if Lil was sitting on a dog, we knew they were in trouble. But they're very intuitive. And it seems like they're like people. Some realize it's happening and they don't really want to deal with it. And others realize it's happening and they want a moment with them. And it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful to see.
Wow, the Chihuahua would go and sit on the dogs that were ready. Wow, that's sad and beautiful all in the same, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
wake up and find out that, okay, oh, I think that we just push aside the instincts of our dogs so much and what they can think and feel and see and hear and understand. And so to have someone be their voice, Michele, like you are, it's really amazing, because we can get stuck in our day-to-day, veterinarians, and technicians, and my day-to-day goes on, and sometimes I just forget, just to have that moment where you just look at them in the eye, and thank you so very much for being that voice for them.
Thank you.
It's truly amazing. What can our listeners do to help? Volunteer? I know obviously financial has to be, I can't only imagine. But can they volunteer? Can they donate blankets? Tell us what we can do.
So if they can go to our website, which is www.monkeyshouse.org, and there's no apostrophe, it's just one word, .org. There's information about volunteering. You really have to be in the South Jersey area to volunteer. There was someone from Scotland that was hell-bent on helping out, and I was like, I don't know what to do. If people from a distance, if we're so desperate to find a grant writer. We need help with something like that.
Okay.
But on our website, they can support us through Amazon Smile, through our wish list, through direct donations. They can just go on our Facebook page, like the page, and share. We post every single night.
Okay.
And just help spread the word.
Okay. So I also want to point out, because we're gonna run out of time here. Michele has agreed to, for our listeners that don't know, the spa just started a Facebook group called Millie's House, and Michelle's agreed to come on and help us answer questions and be there. And she's posting a couple of things and kind of really be our advocate for these senior dogs that are on there. So I will be putting links on there so that you can connect and help and communicate with Michele a little bit, so that we can help out Monkey's House as much as possible. We can't all go and adopt animals from shelters that are ill, but we can definitely help animals from shelters that are ill through Michele. So I'm hoping we can do that. And then on our show notes, everything will be on there to contact Michele and get a hold of that. Michele, is there any last words that you would want to say to a pet parent or somebody thinking about going into doing this?
Actually, two things. One is that if you want to help but can't, if your neighbor's dog is sick and your neighbor's at work, offer to check the dog at noon and take the dog out at noon, giving the dog a break. Giving the owner eyes on, knowing that it's okay. There's so many ways, if we work together, that we can help seniors live well in their final years, and take some of the burden off of the owner who's worried.
Yeah.
That's
a good point.
On our website is frequently asked questions, and people ask all the time, how do I do this? And I can tell you, for me, it was a 5-year journey. I have a significant medical background. I was a traditionally educated registered nurse who took care of a lot of sick dogs. Then I started working with an alternative veterinarian, Dr. Morgan, and she worked with my dogs. I learned tremendously through her, and then established a friendship and a relationship, saying, hey, let's take this further. Because if you don't have that backup, if you don't have the correct diagnosis, you can't work on anything. You're not going to get in the right direction, and your dogs are going to not have a kind ending, or they're going to end up in the emergency room where you're going to be told to put them down because they're old and sick, and that sucks.
Yeah. Those are really good points.
You need to have a solid plan.
I mean, just the going to your neighbor and asking if you can take their dog for a walk. That's huge. I'm going to start doing that. So Thank you, Michele, so much. I'm so sorry we're getting close to running out of time, but I just want to make sure you know I'll have all this information on our website, everything that they can reach out to. I'll be talking to you in the next couple of days. And just thank you so very much for doing what you're doing. Keep doing it. We're here to support you as much as we can, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you so much for always just being there. I hope this episode has given you some inspiration to look further into possibilities if you have an old, sick animal. They're not always time to give up on them. You just need a vet that has more tools in their toolbox, as we like to say. But also really spend some time with your pet so that you can know when the time is right, because sometimes it is just time for them to go. But as always, you can reach out to me anytime through calling the spa, connecting through Millie's house, through my Facebook page. Any of those things, you can reach out and we can do consultations as well. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.